right. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to MCJ Report. This time, number 180. That's right, 180 episodes. But it's actually a lot more because we've done several special presentations and other sagas in between. I hope that everybody is having a lovely evening. As usual, we are broadcasting across a range of different platforms. We're on Facebook, YouTube, Rumble, and Twitter. So regardless of where you are tuned in from, go ahead and share the broadcast, get the word out there. Unfortunately, the algorithms or the council, some people may refer to them as the quote, shadow council, they're not usually too kind to us here on MCJ Report. So do your bit, spread the truth, get the word out there, because we always go into more detail and we tell the other side of the story, otherwise left untold by the mainstream media. And that comes down to you getting the word out there. So if you could do that, I would sure appreciate it. Now, I see a bunch of you tuning in right now. I'd like to welcome all my regulars. I see Paul there. How you going, my friend? Paul's saying he might be heading up to Singleton. So raise your hand if you are going to Singleton next week, because I am, and I'm so excited about it, to go to the Cali. I'll be doing a talk on the Victorian state of affairs. So that is the Caledonian Hotel, Singleton, New South Wales, 18th this month, kicking off at 5 p.m. So tell your friends, tell your family, come on down. It should be a great time. I'll do a talk, and maybe more importantly, we'll have some beers, because at the end of the day, it can't just be all serious stuff, right? You got to be able to have a drink and unwind. Alrighty, guys, so there's Harps there saying that he's going to the range. That sounds like a great place to be going. There's Sharon there. We've got a lot of the old crew back on board. So we've got Mark Rowley. How you going, my friend? Good to see you. Christina, Penny, Michelle. Christina says that we'll never forget what they did. That's right. We will never, ever forget. And we can't forget, because at the end of the day, all the misgivings of the government, they would very much like for we the people to sweep it under the rug, pretend that it never happened, look the other way. But I think I speak on behalf of a lot of people when I say that we are not going to do that. And one way or another, we are committed to getting justice for the many, many injustices that have transpired, especially over the past few years. All right, so ladies and gentlemen, what are we talking about this evening? And why are you watching MCJ Report? Well, it's not just to look at my face. So there's a few things on the agenda. I've got a few notes here. So first of all, Bill Gates increased his net worth by $35 billion over the course of COVID-19. We're going to talk about exactly how he did it. He has an interesting investment strategy that should be of interest and concern to governments around the world, but unfortunately it's not. Also, staying on the topic of Bill Gates, this individual via the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation are actually bankrolling Australian politicians to travel around the world to supposedly learn about issues such as hunger, disease, climate change, vaccine distribution, and vaccine development. So we're going to talk about some of our politicians that have essentially been bankrolled to engage in these trips, and whether or not we think that it's within community expectations that people all the way down to the level of local government are actually heading overseas to attend these particular exercises. Also, the RBA has raised interest rates for the 9th time in 11 months. So we're going to talk about the cause and effect and what we are likely to see, of course, in the property market, but more specifically, the disastrous outcome this will have on potentially millions of homeowners and also people who are renting. Also, the Daniel Andrews government wants to know where you go and what you do. So we see an initiative via the Department of Transport and the Department of Planning to basically install GPS devices inside of people's vehicles, or rather the correct word is not install, but to rather compel Victorian residents to carry a GPS device on them so the data can essentially be collected by a private corporation, handed back to the government, supposedly for the purpose of planning, infrastructure, and development. But there's actually a little bit more to it than that. So we're going to really take a look at the players involved, and I'm going to join a few dots and ultimately just put the information out and let you make up your own mind about it. Now, also on tonight's show, I was going to talk about Anthony Albanese's proposed reforms to Australian firearms legislation and why I think they're destined to not achieve anything positive. But we've run out of time for that for this show, so that segment will be on next week, and there's quite a bit to it, looking through historical data and looking at the alleged links between firearm legislation and what the government refers to as extremism. So I'll certainly delve into that next week, so stay tuned, because my very firm belief is that Anthony Albanese has sold a bill of lies to the Australian public and is simply seeking to finish what John Howard started all the way back in 1996. Apparently it's a controversial topic, but that's why we are MCJ Report. That's why we are independent media, because we don't care about that stuff. If it's fit for reporting on, then that's what we do. Also, last night I was on the Aussie Cossack news show. That's right, we spoke for about an hour in relation to the upcoming New South Wales election. We spoke about the upper house, we spoke about quotas, we really touched on a range of different subjects, mostly in relation to New South Wales. Now, a lot of you may have missed that last night, so I will be playing that also on the show tonight after we run through the segment. So it might be a bit of a long MCJ report tonight, so you're welcome to come and go as you please. But in the meantime, go ahead and make yourself comfy, because the show's just getting started, and as I like to say, let's get this show on the road. Alrighty, so we're connected. Great to see you guys. Go ahead and share the broadcast, get the word out there, and let's make it happen, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? Alrighty, now let's start. Alright, so MCJ Report is back, of course, once a week every Thursday night. Now, if you would like to support the show, you can do so via shop.mcjreport.com. Now, let me add in that the show will always be open and free to anybody that wants to watch it. There will never be any type of fee for accessing and watching MCJ Report. But of course, a lot of time goes into this show, and MCJ Report is now actually in a position where it has a staff member, not just me. So if you'd like to contribute the show and see MCJ Report reach a new level, then you can go on over to shop.mcjreport.com and you can support the show that way. So we've got stickers from $9.95, weatherproof stickers such as the Red Ensign. You can grab a few stickers, put it on your car. We've got t-shirts, and what I'm most excited about is we now have MCJ Report travel mug buddies. I think that's the correct term. So the good news is that you could, within a few days, be your very own owner of an MCJ Report travel mug buddy, and you can take MCJ Report with you wherever you go, and that way you'll know that you never walk alone. Anyway, that was a bit cheesy, but that's my pitch for today. So that's shop.mcjreport.com. The future of the show depends on you. Alrighty. Also, ladies and gentlemen, I am heading to New South Wales and I want you to join me. So the 18th, not this Saturday, but the one after, 5 p.m, stories and drinks at the Kelly, the State of Victorian Affairs, featuring your favorite freedom guy, right? Morgan C. Jonas. So if you happen to be around, then come on down. If you feel like a road trip, come. This particular pub, I say, is an Australian landmark. Some people dream about going to the Eiffel Tower or the Empire State Building. I say that those sites are irrelevant to us. The Kelly, that's where it's at. Brad, and the stand that he took against the government is a true representation of the Australian spirit and what our country is supposed to be about. Not cowering to bullies, not getting on board with nonsensical policy. Brad stood strong in the face of many attacks. He refused to discriminate. And so I say, let's go to the Kelly. Let's have a drink. I'm going to do a talk. So hopefully I'll see you there. Alrighty, let's get started, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? Alrighty, so Gates banked 35 billion US dollars during COVID-19. Now, this probably does not come as a surprise to a lot of people. We know that during COVID, many of the world's billionaires increased their wealth. So did many of the world's wealthiest corporations, to the likes of Amazon, Alibaba, Facebook, etc. And Microsoft did as well. But the net gains of Microsoft do not equate for the total net gains that Bill Gates, the individual, was able to accumulate. Now, why do you think that is? Now, don't get me wrong, there's definitely an element of that in there. I'm going to show you a little bit of what Microsoft was able to pull off during COVID-19, and I'm also going to show you about some other, let's call them investment strategies that Bill Gates likes to employ. Alrighty, so as you can see right here, the share price of Microsoft during the, say, 2 to 3 years of COVID nearly tripling in price. We see the revenue up 75 billion, maxing out there in 2022 at over 200 billion US dollars. And we see the total market value, or otherwise referred to as net worth, toppling nearly $2 trillion. So no doubt some major gains made there by Microsoft, but Bill Gates has found a different investment strategy. So it was back in 2019, and I'm not sure that he'll be repeating these words anytime soon, but he was actually gloating about the huge returns that he has been able to attain via investing in vaccine development and research and distribution. And he really was very excited to learn about how big those returns were in comparison to, say, investing in blue chip stocks. Anyway, take a look.
You've invested $10 billion in vaccinations over the last 2 decades, and you figured out the return on investment for that, and it kind of stunned me. Can you walk us through the math?
Well, it's pretty impressive that when you take these vaccines, get them to be very inexpensive by making big volume commitments, have that right relationship with the private sector, get the delivery system so they're really getting the coverage out there, you literally save millions of lives. And 20 years ago, when we created these new multilateral organizations, Gavi for the vaccines, Global Fund for HIV, TB and malaria, we didn't know they'd be successful. They've gone through lots of challenges about making sure the money gets there, making sure the efficiency is right. But as we look at upcoming replenishments for those, and we've got so much distraction politically that the international needs like this could get eclipsed if we're not careful, we see a phenomenal track record. It's been $100 billion overall that the world's put in. Our foundation is a bit more than $10 billion, but we feel there's been over a 20-to-1 return. So if you just look at the economic benefits, that's a pretty strong number compared to anything else. The human benefit in millions of lives saved. So, we're here with a pretty strong message that although all these other issues are very important, let's not forget about the great success in global health and maintaining that commitment.
I think the numbers that you ran through were, if you had put that money into an S&P 500 and reinvested the dividends, you'd come up with something like $17 billion, but you think it's $200 billion.
Here, yeah. Helping young children live, get the right nutrition, contribute to their countries, that has a payback that goes beyond any typical financial.
The typical billionaire justification, right? Well, yeah, I'm making billions of dollars, but I'm doing it for the overall betterment of humanity. Notice when asked these questions, Mr. Gates likes to go on long tangents about how he's serving humanity, etc. Meanwhile, COVID-19 kicks in and the man's able to increase his net worth by 35 billion US dollars. Now, let me ask you the question at home. Given the huge profits this man has been able to pocket, can one really refer to Bill Gates as a humanitarian and a philanthropist, or is he simply just a multi-billionaire American businessman who really seeks to dominate markets around the world? And you don't need to go down any rabbit holes to come up with some fairly logical explanations for what motivates various human beings in life. One thing we should never ever underestimate is the power of greed. What motivates people in the world who already have everything, who already have all the money to buy whatever they want? Well, it's power, it's dominance, and I don't care what anyone says, people at that level, they're not immune to that sort of thing. So if they were truly humanitarians, you would see their net value decreasing, not increasing. Does that make sense to you, ladies and gentlemen? Now, 20 to 1 return, just unbelievable. Now, in addition to that, and Bill Gates, of course, made some disparaging remarks about the stock market when compared to the returns that he would expect through the development of vaccines and the distribution. But he is no stranger of the stock market either. So let me just show you what we've got right here. Just 1 second, let me pull it up on my screen. Alrighty, so a good article from the Ron Paul Institute. Bill Gates secured hundreds of millions in profits from mRNA stock sales before suddenly changing tune on vaccine technology. So the acquisition was indeed made in 2019, and Bill Gates must have incredible foresight or a crystal ball, or maybe he's an inside trader. Not saying that he is, just saying that it's a possibility. You never know at that sort of high levels. But due to the time in which he invested in BioNTech, into the specifically mRNA technology, he was able to cash out $260 million US in 2021, with $242 million being tax-free, because those funds went straight back into the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. So incredible foresight there by Mr. Gates to predict that the stock price for the development of mRNA technology would drastically increase, and even better foresight to sell the shares when it looked like perhaps there was going to be issues with that particular market. So what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Does this call for an investigation? But at the end of the day, who is truly going to investigate it? You see, when it comes to the world's global elite, and Bill Gates most definitely falls into this category with a net worth of over 100 billion US dollars. So the man has more buying power than a huge amount of countries in the world today. It really does appear to be anarchy at those levels. I mean, what we're looking at here with what we've seen over the past few years with the development of vaccines, the global rollout, and governments around the world adopting mandates as part of their policy, it has resulted in an extraordinary profit-making opportunity for people such as Bill Gates, who has a vested interest in Big Pharma, and also the big pharmaceutical corporations. They literally could not have found themselves in a better situation. Just imagine having a business producing a product, not needing to spend any money on marketing or advertising, and being legally immune should something go wrong with the product, resulting in injury or death. And on top of that, governments around the world essentially putting forward mandates for the industrial scale consumption of that product on a global scale. Think about how much money you would make. Now, I believe what we're seeing here, and we very well may see some similar trends with the rolling out of certain surveillance devices via maybe biotechnology companies in conjunction with technology companies, is a very strong partnership forming between the global corporations, global government, and of course regional government and government on a country-to-country level. So it's becoming harder and harder to actually differentiate between political interests and corporate interests. They appear to be merging together in some type of fusion, some sort of state/corporate hybrid. Now, there's another word for when this happens, ladies and gentlemen, and 10 points if you know what that word is. And what I'm referring to is the fusion of corporations and state. And that word is actually fascism. That's right, but don't take it from me. Don't take it from me. Take it from the godfather of fascism, Benito Mussolini, who said, quote, "Fascism should more appropriately be called corporatism because it is a merger of state and corporate power." Alrighty, so when we see governments and states around the world adopting a product, doesn't matter what product it is, seemingly without asking any of their own questions and really forcing that product into the population of which said government claims to serve, then it's only fair and reasonable that we ask questions, and it's only fair and reasonable that we do everything in our power to maintain our freedom, because of course when choice is taken away, when thought is taken away, when consent is taken away, when language becomes distorted, when all of a sudden the government has a keen interest in your safety and your health, and this is for your benefit. We look throughout history, and that is always a roadmap towards tyranny. And in this case, I say fascism as well. So that's why we're MCJ Report, because we just talk about this kind of stuff. And to me, it's pointing out the obvious. And if you agree, then go ahead and share this broadcast and strike up a conversation with your friends and family around the dinner table. Alrighty, so what else do we have? Bill Gates is bankrolling overseas trips for Australian politicians. All right, now this is also very disturbing. Now, let me start off by telling you how this came about my desk. Last week, I reported on the Maribyrnong City Council and a decision that was reached to heritage list 900 homes in that local region. And that decision has reportedly resulted in the loss of hundreds of thousands of dollars off the market value of an array of local properties. Now, the person you see in the photograph right there on my screen, that is the mayor of the Maribyrnong City Council. Her name is Sarah Carter. I actually sent her an email last week inquiring and asking questions about the decision to heritage list those very dilapidated homes. I did not receive a response. And I'm actually revisiting the Maribyrnong Council now because one of my great supporters sent some information to me in relation to a statement that the mayor of the Maribyrnong City Council made on her Instagram. I'm going to show you what that is. So let me show you this. Okay, so this is in her bio. So the mayor of the Maribyrnong City Council, also the manager of the Australian Regional Leadership Initiative at Save the Children Australia, funded by the Gates Foundation. So I said, all right, well, this is pretty interesting. You've got my attention now. I'd like to do a bit of digging and find out about this organization that is receiving funding from Bill Gates and supposedly creating platforms for these Australian politicians. So I'm going to show you a little bit more information right here. All right, so what we see, a post from the Maribyrnong mayor from Kenya. That's right. So leading a delegation of Australian politicians, including, looks like Michael McCormack, Louise Pratt, Graham Perrott, Senator Claire Chandler, Matt Byrne, Tanya Lawrence, and James Stevens, to East Africa to talk about and understand the impact of climate change on food security. Alrighty, so we see the Australian Regional Leadership Initiative that Sarah here has stated in her bio is funded by the Gates Foundation. So we wonder, what is the purpose and what does Gates seek to achieve by bankrolling the overseas trips of these Australian politicians at both a local, state and federal level? We see another post right here from the mayor, seemingly very happy, taking a photograph and stating that she visited the maternity ward of a local public hospital and attended a group vaccination of newborns ranging in age from age 6 weeks to 9 months. All right, so there's a few questions that we need to be asking here. We know that, of course, Bill Gates has a vested interest in the vaccine industry, both development and distribution. So do you think that it's fair, reasonable, and within expectations of the community that we have politicians all the way down to a local government council level being bankrolled by Bill Gates, flown around the world? They're learning about things such as climate change and vaccine rollouts, and then coming back to Australia. Now, could there be a possibility that there is some type of expectation that after they receive this type of financial treatment, that these politicians will come back to Australia and seek to implement policy that is in line of the notions and narratives of the trip of which they embarked on, bankrolled by Bill Gates? We know for sure that policy is now crafted at an international level. So considering that Bill Gates and the Gates Foundation is a global entity, I think it would be only fair and reasonable that any politician accepting funding from Gates to travel overseas should register as a foreign agent with our federal foreign influence registry. What do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Because here in Australia, I think that we can all agree that we expect our local councillors to pick up our rubbish, take care of our roads, look after our parks, keep an eye on the local library. We certainly don't expect them to be travelling around the world funded by billionaires only so they can come back to Australia to potentially, or I would say more than likely, implement policy that's in line with the narrative of their journey. What do you think about that, ladies and gentlemen? Put your thoughts in the comments. So I thought I would take a bit more of a further look into this particular organisation. The name of it is Save the Children. So on the outset, it looks like a pretty normal organisation, not for profit. They want to save the children and do a whole lot of good things for humanity. Building a better world for children. All right, it all sounds very good. Now, I took a bit of a look through the website and I can most definitely see that this website provides a very broad platform for writing about and producing articles in relation to the COVID-19 vaccine. So lots and lots of pages via this website promoting the vaccine, urging governments to spend more money on vaccines. Could this be a conflict of interest with, say, the commercial and corporate agenda of Bill Gates? Could it be? I don't know. What do I know? I'm just some guy sitting in front of a green screen. I'm asking you at home. So we see articles even such as how to talk to kids about vaccines, conflict threatens global security as children miss out on life-saving vaccines. So if Bill Gates is funding this organization and he has a financial interest in that sort of sector, how's that not a conflict of interest? Why are there some rules for certain people and completely different rules for other? That's a question that I have for you at home. So I guess my conclusion of this, ladies and gentlemen, is that we need to call this out, okay? We need to be holding our politicians to account. Australian politicians, both local, state and federal, should not be getting bankrolled by global billionaires to travel around the world, whereby we know they could be influenced to act in ways that are serving potentially the interests of corporate shareholders and not serving the interests of we, the Australian people. All right, moving along here, ladies and gentlemen. Now let me just make sure that we're connected. Alrighty, Facebook is on. We got YouTube. Let me just have a look at Rumble real quick. Rumble is ticking over. Guys, go ahead and share the broadcast. Get the word out there. Give it a nice big share. Tell your friends, tell your family. We are MCJ Reports. We are, of course, independent media. Alrighty, let's keep this rolling along, shall we, ladies and gentlemen? Alrighty, so what do we have next? Alright, RBA delivers 9th straight interest rate hike. Now, ladies and gentlemen, this is no laughing matter. This is very serious. And I dare say that this additional interest rate hike may be the final nail in the coffin for many, many Australian families who very likely will be unable to keep up with their mortgage repayments. Now, if you were to watch our federal parliament, you may be under the impression that supposedly this interest rate hike is just one big laughing matter and that no one's really to blame and it's just some sort of hokey pokey business where Labor and Liberal just dance around the edges without ever addressing what the true issues are, resulting in the huge interest rate rises in our country. And I wouldn't blame you for thinking that. So here's a little clip from Parliament the other day of Albo getting questioned on this interest rate hike. Take a look at this.
The Deputy Leader of the Opposition has the call.
My question is to the Prime Minister. Before the election, the Prime Minister promised he would deliver cheaper mortgages. Since the election, mortgage repayments have increased by around $1,400 a month for a typical Australian family, and every economic decision the government has taken has pushed interest rates higher than they otherwise would be. Why do Australian families always have to pay more under Labor?
Order. Members on my right will cease interjecting. The Minister for Climate Change will cease interjecting. The Prime Minister will be heard in silence. They give him the call.
It's a reality of a world where there's inflation. I think Australians understand that. There's a lot of pressure, upward pressure on interest rates at the moment. They're not my words, they're his. The Leader of the Opposition. They are the words of the Leader of the Opposition on the 3rd of May 2000.
I mean, really, it's just a big joke to this man, isn't it? There's Albo right there, of course, looking very happy with himself. Just life is one big joke, and blame Liberal, blame Labor. But what we don't see from either party right there in the House of Representatives at a federal level is the government talking about the root cause behind why exactly interest rates are rising and what the government, God forbid, could have done differently to potentially safeguard Australians, to safeguard Australian homeowners from inevitably losing their dream, their family home. So first, I'm just going to show you the extent to which interest rates have risen. I'm going to talk about what is likely going to proceed from this point forward. And we're going to have a very basic conversation about some of the factors involved when interest rates rises, cause and effect, that type of thing. Now, please note, I am not an economist, but the stuff we're talking about on the show is like really, really basic, 1 + 1 = 2, that type of basic stuff. Anyway, just taking a look here, ladies and gentlemen, we look at the cash rate from the RBA was all the way down at 0.1% back in April of 2022, hitting 3.35% on February 2023, representing a drastic rise. In terms of how that affects people's mortgages for domestic property, you have a look at around this time last year, the rate was down around 3.5%, and now it's about 6.5%. If you're lucky, might be a bit more, or if you're very lucky, maybe a little bit less. So what I want to show you is how this is affecting the repayments for mortgages here in our country. All right, so here's a hypothetical scenario based on a $500,000 loan from 1 year ago at an interest rate of 3.5%, repayments consisting of principal and interest, equated to $2,245 per month and 22 cents. That same loan today is $3,160.34 per month, representing an increase of $915.12 per month, or $10,981.44 per annum. Now you tell me, which working class family just happens to have an extra $11,000 just laying around? Anthony Albanese should really be ashamed of himself for pointing the finger, and you know what, the Liberal Party should as well, because they know why these interest rates are taking place, but they'll never accept ownership for it, because if they do, what else do they accept? They accept fault, and that would be very, very bad for them politically speaking. They'd feel it at the polls, and I think there's one thing we all know is that these politicians care first and foremost about votes. Alrighty, so another example here. Let's talk about a $1 million home loan. This time last year, you'd be looking at repayments at 3.5%, equating to $4,490.45 per month. Whereas today, that same loan, $6,320.68, representing an increase of $1,830.23 per month, or $21,962.76 per annum. So put that into perspective, ladies and gentlemen. We look at the cost of living in this country. Of course, we see inflation, the devaluing of our currency. We see the increases in energy, fuel, food, and in addition, now with the increases in interest rates, and given the fact that wages are stagnate and our population is growing, so there's going to be less to go around, less money supply, how many Australians are going to slide into poverty as a result of how our country has been governed, especially over the past 3 years? Well, I'll tell you one person who's not sliding into poverty anytime soon, and that is indeed our Prime Minister, Anthony Albanese, who is most fortunate enough to live in a mansion rent-free, it's called Kirribilli, whilst receiving an additional $1,350 a week from his property portfolio right? And that's in addition to his wage and all the perks that he receives as Prime Minister. So I think I do understand why it is a joke for Albo, because he's not feeling the pinch and he can just get on the floor of Parliament and act like he's some sort of clown performing in a circus. And at the end of the day, he will never rub shoulders with the true working class of this country who are going to be affected as a result of the government's inept governing. All right, so I've got a few dot points here. We're just going to have a bit of a talk about interest rates and some of the cause and effects. And once again, I am not an economist, but you don't need to be to really bring up these types of topics. This is basic stuff. This is like primary school level math, 1 + 1 = 2. All right, so first of all, when we see the interest rates rise, that will most likely lead to a downswing in the property market. That's right. So we'll see properties decreasing in value. So in addition to a huge amount of Australians who I'm sure now are destined to lose their homes, an extra kick in the guts is that those homes will become very, very much depreciated in value. So what happens after that stage? We see the banks repossessing homes, and shortly after, I have no doubt we'll also see an influx of predatory investors swooping in to purchase those formerly distressed properties. Maybe the government will open the doors to international investors. Maybe we'll see an influx of Chinese capital, American capital, capital from various countries around the world seeking to capitalize off a very distressed Australian property market at the expense of crushed dreams and ambitions of Australians. So that's something that we could very well see, especially should interest rates continue to rise. I was having a chat on the phone before with a friend of mine, a good mate of mine up in Queensland, Steve Dixon. Lots of you know who he is. And he's convinced that interest rates are just going to keep moving up higher and higher. So another question is, how did we get here? And could this have been avoided? Well, in order to answer that question, we need to first understand what are some of the factors that will instigate these types of rises in interest rates. So I've got a list here. I'm just going to speak to you about it. So first of all, we can look at inflation. Our government has been on a tear, printing money, injecting money into our local economy. And what we know is that with the printing of money comes the devaluation of our dollar. Okay, so that's a contributing factor right there. Another factor is excessive government spending. Okay, so let me ask you the question, how much has our government on a federal, state and territory level spent on the COVID-19 response over the past 3 years? Okay, so we're looking at, of course, in the billions of dollars, multiple billions of dollars. But when we also take into account the losses in terms of economic productivity and the shutting down of our industries, we're looking at a huge loss to Australia that by any estimates would have to be no less than $1 trillion, maybe more than our GDP. It's very hard to find accurate estimates on this figure, ladies and gentlemen, but if you can sit at home and just do a little bit of mathematics in your head and you think, how much did the government spend on the COVID response? How much have we lost in terms of industrial and economic productivity? That's when you'll start to understand the strain of the economy, which of course leads to a deficit in money supply. So we see the interest rates rising, indicating a shortage in money supply. Just like a supply and demand model for any business, prices are dictated by supply and demand. So the less money around, the higher interest rates will increase, and the greater perceived risk out there right now in terms of lending that there is, the higher interest rates will rise once again, because of course the RBA is looking to mitigate their risk when it comes to lending. So if the general perception of the RBA is that Australians will struggle to repay their loans, which of course they will, given the rise in interest rates and the huge increases to the cost of living, therefore the banking general financial system is looking to hedge their bets by raising interest rates in order to compensate for the additional risk that's out there in the market. Also, another contributing factor is deficit spending. So governments outspending their budgets. And of course, we have seen that here in Australia, both at a federal, state and territory level. Once again, in the response to COVID-19, governments outspending their budgets without any plan for economic recovery, spending money that they don't have. And of course, as a result of that, our debt has reached an unprecedented level that very well may burden future generations for many, many years to come. So these are just some of the factors involved that can impact these rises. Once again, this is just really basic stuff, but even simply what I've mentioned today, it'd be nice if the government came out to at least address these concerns, address the failures in governance, address why, for instance, the government did not look at a pandemic response such as the Great Barrington Declaration, which is centered around protecting the vulnerable, but allowing those who are not at risk to continue living their everyday lives, including activities such as running a business, etc., manufacturing, exporting, keeping the farms open, and so forth. So what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think that we will see the government own up to their disastrous decisions that they made during COVID-19? Or do you think we'll simply see the Liberal Labor blame game continue? Nobody takes responsibility, and therefore it's nobody's fault. Well, ladies and gentlemen, we need different people in politics in this country. Been saying it for a few years now. And all this proves is that we, the people, need to roll our sleeves up. We need to work harder. We need to fight harder. We can change things around here in Australia. Australia is beautiful. It's worth fighting for. It's going to be very difficult to steer the ship straight. Very difficult, but not impossible. You just have to have faith in your fellow Australians. Stay patriotic, love this country, and recognise that those who serve within the walls of our parliament are nothing more than a bunch of clowns performing in a circus. All right, moving along here, ladies and gentlemen. Alrighty, so the Victorian government wants to know where you go and what you do. Now, a lot of us know this already. Of course, it was revealed by the Herald Sun last year that Insights Victoria, which is funded to the tune of $4.4 million, has actually been collecting the social media habits of Victorian residents, mostly in relation to the perceptions and thoughts and feelings that we, the people of Victoria, have in relation to the government's response to COVID-19, or more specifically, keeping a close eye on those who express dissent. That's right. We are turning into a surveillance state in Victoria, and what I'm about to show you is really just adding to that equation of surveillance and the government seeking to be involved in areas of our lives where they're not welcome, and seeking to centrally plan our lives and our neighborhoods in, once again, ways and manners where they're not welcome, that I say serve in their interests and in the interests of a select few corporations. All right, so anyway, what are we talking about here? Why am I making this post? The Victorian government wants to know where you go and what you do. Alrighty, so one of my supporters reached out to me the other day, and she received a couple of letters in the mail, basically a proposition from a private corporation acting on behalf of the Department of Transport for her to participate in effectively a survey that required her to carry on her a privately issued GPS device so that her movements, where she goes, what she does, could be recorded, and that data would effectively be sent to the Victorian government under the guise of crafting policy that can help with things like urbanisation, development, and planning. Now, of course, me being who I am, I did not take this on face value, and I wanted to really look into this exercise a little bit further, and I wanted to find out who are the stakeholders in this private corporation. Could there be a conflict of interest? Could there be an alternate reason as to why the government is seeking to acquire this very personal data? And I'm going to share with you what I found, but before I do, I'm going to show you some of the documents that were received in the mail. All right, so I'm not going to start with that one. All right, so first of all, what we have here, the initial letter to a resident, okay? So from a private corporation, which I'm going to tell you a little bit more about in a bit, called Ipsos, all right? Big French company, data collection, big survey company. Lots of links in lots of interesting places. Anyway, Victorian Integrated Survey of Travel and Activity. Dear resident, you should have received a letter from the Department of Transport inviting your household to take part in a survey of day-to-day travel. Ipsos has been appointed to conduct this survey on the department's behalf. I'd love to see that contract, ladies and gentlemen. I wonder how much it's worth. The survey pack for your household is enclosed. I would appreciate it if all pages from the orange household form were completed, including information about the usual residents in the household and any household vehicles. The blue travel day forms should be completed on your travel day by everyone in your household aged 5 and above, so they even want to monitor the movements of 5-year-olds. Instructions on how to fill out the survey are provided on each of the forms and in the green helpful hints booklet enclosed. Please ensure each person aged 16 and above takes their device with them whenever they leave the house or office over the course of the 3 days assigned to them, even for short trips, such as going out for coffee, visiting a neighbor, or walking the dog. Carry your device even when you are a passenger for all types of transport. Walk, bike, drive, bus, taxi, train, truck, skateboard. Says here, a representative of the travel survey team will return to collect your completed forms and the GPS devices on the first Sunday and Tuesday after the travel days, and there's a number you can call if you have questions. Now, this is pretty interesting, ladies and gentlemen. I mean, I just look at this and I think, what is the value of this contract? How much of our taxpayer dollars has the Victorian government spent to set up this surveillance operation? And I'm just going to call it that. Anyway, I'm going to keep reading to you, ladies and gentlemen. So this is the instructions that were received. All right, so just basically instructing participants how to carry the device. That's what the device looks like. All right, so just some instructions. Charge it every day. Make sure you carry it. Don't leave it at home. Take care of it. You know, they say they will not be responsible for any damage on the electrical devices. All right, so make sure you don't damage it. Don't drop it in the pool, because the company issuing this device, Ipsos, they're not going to cover the cost, supposedly. They even include, as you can see here, a little hanging thing to put on your door. I don't know what to call it. It's like you're at a hotel. It's like a do not disturb sign, reminding participants in the survey that they need to carry the GPS device with them. Now, I actually sent a letter to the Minister for Transport here in Victoria, just asking a few questions that I think the public deserve to know. Now, this is a bloke by the name of Ben Carroll. Here are the questions I asked him. All right, number 1, what is the dollar value of the contract between the Vic government and Ipsos? 2, will the survey data potentially be used for establishing 20-minute cities? 3, can you guarantee that Victoria will not introduce Oxford Council-style traffic filters, something similar, or restrictions in order to control where and when and how Victorians travel? 4, can you guarantee that the decision to commission Ipsos is free from conflict of interest? 5, does the Victorian state government have any intention to restrict Victorians' movements in order to combat climate change? Alrighty, so what do you think, ladies and gentlemen? Do you think that I received a response from Mr. Carroll? Well, no. Now, sometimes it takes him a while to respond. He probably won't respond. I'm definitely not holding my breath, but I'd like to see if he gets back to me, because I don't think they can answer these questions honestly. I called up the Ipsos line before and I spoke to a customer service agent, but it was really just, he was reciting to me over the phone what he had been trained. So I'm not going to play that call because it really doesn't prove anything in one way, shape or form. So there he is there, Ben Carroll. I think he's got a lot of questions to answer there, Minister for Transport from Dan Andrews' cabinet. So feel free to reach out to him if you think that he should be answering some questions. Now, that's not what I wanted to do. I took it upon myself to have a closer look at the organization, the private organization that has been contracted to conduct this survey and to manage this data on behalf of the Victorian government. So I'm going to show you what I found. All right, so name of the company is Ipsos, a data collection survey company based in France. It's the third largest market and public opinion company in the world, with a market value of 2.74 billion euros, which equates to 4.2 billion Australian dollars. We look at some notable shareholders here on the company, and we see some names that you might be familiar with, such as JP Morgan Asset Management, the Vanguard Group, and BlackRock Fund Advisors. It's also important to point out that Ipsos over the years has received multiple millions of dollars in grants from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. That's right. So just a little bit of a background on who they are and what they do. Now, I think it's a very important question that many of you are raising, whether or not this type of data collection is in relation to the government's proposed 20-minute neighborhoods. I was calling it 20-minute cities. I meant 20-minute neighborhoods, which is basically a vision of the Victorian state government to have residents more or less in a position whereby they don't need to travel more than 20 minutes from their home in order to access everything they need in terms of food, employment, and recreational activities. A big driving motivation behind the establishment of these 20-minute neighborhoods is that supposedly this will be a strategy for combating climate change. Now, don't give the Victorian government too much credit for coming up with the 20-minute neighborhoods. This, of course, is a topic that has been long cooked up in the basement of the World Economic Forum. So if you look around the world, you'll see lots of governments, lots of local councils seeking to establish either a 15/20-minute city, 15/20-minute neighborhood, etc. Now, before I show you some interesting information from a local council in the UK, I'm going to first show you the video produced by the Victorian state government that supposedly is explaining the benefits of rolling out and developing these so-called 20-minute neighbourhoods. Take a look.
To improve livability, the Victorian government is working to create a city of 20-minute neighbourhoods. It's all about creating walkable neighbourhoods where people can live locally. Places where communities can access most of their daily needs within a 20-minute return walk from home. These places should have diverse housing options and access to safe cycling routes and local public transport, local health facilities, parks, shops and other local infrastructure. We are already working with local government, communities and industry to deliver projects and are committed to building a livable city of 20-minute neighbourhoods. To find out more, visit the Plan Melbourne website.
All right, so there you go, ladies and gentlemen. That's the Victorian state government's explanation for what it is. And, you know, they're going to be very coy about this. Of course, any type of so-called initiative that will ultimately dictate how people live will be sold to the public in terms of benefits. Well, it's going to save you money. It's going to reduce your carbon footprint. You're going to be able to make more money because you don't have to travel too far, more time with your friends and family. Now, whenever the government bends over backwards to convince you that they are acting in your best interests, your response should always be, well, what other interests are involved? Are there corporate interests involved? Are we seeing a further merger of corporatism and state? So let me just show you some extra documents right here. Now, the private corporation that has been contracted to collect this data, Ipsos, I would like to bring to your attention that they were commissioned by the Oxford Council in the UK back in 2019 in order to conduct what they referred to as a citizens' assembly on climate change. All right. And what we've seen from that same council, that's the Oxfordshire Council over there in the UK, is the rolling out of what they refer to as traffic filters. All right. So what exactly are these traffic filters? Well, effectively, the local government over there in Oxford, they are restricting where residents can travel, when they can travel and effectively restricting what people can do. And should residents break those rules, they will receive hefty fines in the mail. Now, the purported reason for the implementation for these so-called traffic filters is to combat climate change. Alrighty, now I think that it's very telling that this local government commissioned Ipsos a few years ago to conduct some special operations, and that we've seen the rolling out of these traffic filters. So, and considering that the Victorian state government has commissioned the same corporation Ipsos and is collecting data that is most definitely in relation to local communities, local travel, where people go and what they do, it's only fair and reasonable that we are very, very suspicious of what the government is doing. Now, there's people out there that will say, well, you're crazy. The government would never impose mandates in terms of when and where we can travel and what we could do. The government would never do that. Well, hey, I say to those people, the government said that a lot of things would not become compulsory or mandated in this country. Who here remembers this?
We do not have a mandatory vaccination policy in this country. We do not have that. We are not proposing to have that. That is not changing.
Yeah, so ladies and gentlemen, I guess my advice to the public is do not participate in these exercises. Right now, the government's saying, well, it's voluntary. If you want to take this GPS and report where you go and what you do, it's up to you. Who says it will not become mandatory in the future? Who says that we won't have these so-called traffic signals like in Oxford in the UK? Who says there won't be restrictions on where we can go, when we can go, how far we can drive, and what we can do? What we need to recognize is that the government is not the solution to our problems. Problems can only be solved by we the people, looking after ourselves, looking after our families, promoting a system of decentralization, whereas the government is only interested in central planning, making contracts with these private corporations, pursuing the fusion of corporatism and state at the expense of our freedom, at the expense of our interests, and in favor of the interests of those who hold large amounts of shares in these companies. Call it out for what it is, ladies and gentlemen. It is insider trading. It is corruption. It's reminiscent of how the mafia acted during the days of Prohibition, except, unfortunately, these folks in government are able to get away with it for now until we, the people, stand up. And guys, stand up, we must do. Now, excuse me for a second. If you remember last week on the show, I nearly had a bad choking episode, desperately needed water. So this time I've made sure, big glass of water, never leaves my side. Alrighty, so let me just have a look. I see there's 132 of you tuned in. Share the broadcast, guys, because guess what? A special treat tonight. Sorry, give me a second. A special treat tonight. Raise your hand if you know who this guy is. Simeon, the Aussie Cossack, that's right. Very, very popular YouTuber. He started his own independent news outlet. Lots of you follow him. Lots of you enjoy his content. Thanks for bearing with me during this little struggle right now. So I sat down over a Zoom with Simeon last night for about an hour. We spoke about politics. We spoke about the New South Wales state election. We had a really good talk. I've got the interview here in case you missed it. I'm going to play it for you. Right now it goes for an hour. So enjoy the show and share it around. Worries.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Aussie Cossack, and today we're joined by a special guest, Morgan Jonas, leader of the Victorian Freedom Party. Morgan, welcome.
Aussie Cossack, thanks for having me on. It's great to be back.
Thank you for being with us. Look, Morgan, you're sort of now post-Victorian election mode, so you've come up with a great result. You've had a great result in Victoria. You had 100,000 votes for a party that had just, come from nothing into something. So, as always, I'd like to start with congratulating you with that feat. I think it's an excellent result to have 100,000 votes, from a grassroots, very organic movement. And if you just joined us, guys, Morgan Jonas is the leader of the Victorian Freedom Party. And they did have an excellent result of last election, which is why we've got him on today, you could say, as an expert to give his perspective, to give his commentary, to give his thoughts, and most importantly, to give his experience. You know, although Dan Andrews did win the Victorian election, tragically, it was a big tragedy for not only Victoria, but for all of Australia. It's important that we learn. We learn from the lessons, from the positives and the negatives, and who better to share those experiences with New South Wales than Morgan himself. So Morgan, we've got plenty of people tuning in online, guys, and as we get more people tuning in, share this video right now on your social media. We're going to get through all your questions that you have for Morgan, but the hope is tonight, out of this interview that we're having, is to get a better perspective for ourselves in New South Wales. And Morgan, from Victoria at the moment, tell us, what is your perspective? What does it look like in New South Wales?
Well, first of all, again, thanks for having me on, and I'd like to welcome everybody to the broadcast. And Simeon, you're doing a great job running your independent media. So everybody watching, please go ahead and share the broadcast. Let's get the word out there, because as you know, we can't rely on the mainstream media for anything reasonable. So it's good to support those that are doing it independently. Well, Simeon, you've got an interesting election coming up, and I've been looking at a few numbers, and of course there are a few variables. One thing we know for sure is that the polls are not always right, but if we were looking at the polls, it appears that Labor is etching ahead of coalition, largely in response to what the media report to be a surge in young voters getting behind Labor more so than Liberal. Now, we know without any doubt the polls are not necessarily something that we can swear by. It's not some type of dogma. The polls have been wrong plenty of times before. But if that is anything to go by, then I dare say the real crux of the election will be the result of the upper house, of course, but more specifically, the crossbench. So we look at New South Wales, we see some interesting parties running, of course, in the upper house, and I'm referring to the Liberal Democrats, One Nation, and Shooters, Fishers, Farmers. So the question is, how many seats will these parties get? Well, once again, there's a few variables. What it really comes down to is, to what extent have these parties been campaigning over the past few years in order to build their brand in preparation for the 2023 election? Now, obviously, I'm not in the ground in New South Wales, so I don't know. Maybe people in the chat can share their thoughts. But if we're looking at the results from, say, the federal election, looking at the Senate, and looking at the past New South Wales election, taking into account, of course, that the number of parties contesting does differ from one election cycle to another, I think we could very well be looking at, I'm going to go out and say 5 to 6 seats as a combination of those three parties that I mentioned, with 21 seats up for grabs. I'd say that is a pretty good outlook. It's something that we can be excited about. I think it's most definitely incumbent on people to volunteer and to get involved if they'd like to see these parties get across the line. And when we're looking at Labor versus the Liberal Nationals, it's a little bit up in the air where the results may be. But ideally, what you'd like is an upper house whereby the balance of power lays between, let's say, One Nation, Shooters, and the Liberal Democrats. That is what I think would probably be the desired outcome for most of your followers, Simeon.
Right, so we know you guys put in a lot of effort there in Victoria. You had an excellent result, again, 100,000 votes from a party that was formed out of nothing. You know, the laws are a little bit different in New South Wales. It's much harder to form a party in New South Wales. And, you know, under Christina Keneally, when she was the Premier, she rushed through legislation to make it very difficult for the small minor and micro parties to fund themselves with the help of the general public. You know, obviously the legislation favours the major parties, favours Liberal and Labor. You know, in the current situation, you know, we've got a range of parties. Do you want to just read out for us, Morgan, which parties are registered in New South Wales for the election, the people out there?
Yep, not a problem. I've got it right here on my screen. All right, so we have the Animal Justice Party. Now, ladies and gentlemen, stay away from this party. They care nothing for justice for anyone, especially justice for humans. The Animal Justice Party, of course, a very, very far leftist party, one that you would not want to touch with a 40-foot pole. You got the Australian Labor Party, Informed Medical Options, a good party that believes in freedom of choice. Now, they edged out 0.4% in the Senate in New South Wales in the election past. I predict IMOP will probably be around the 0.5 to 0.6%. Again, it depends to what degree has this party been campaigning, but IMOP is most definitely a good choice there. Legalize cannabis. Now, legalized cannabis is a lot more than just simply a matter of legalizing cannabis, ladies and gentlemen. Here in Victoria, legalized cannabis acted as a funnel to the radical leftist party known as the Reason Party, headed up by Fiona Patten. And if you know anything about Fiona Patten, she is pro-lockdown, pro-mandates, and pro-taking away your freedom. Below, you've got the Liberal Democratic Party, which probably most of you are familiar with. The National Party, Pauline Hanson's One Nation, needs no introduction. The Public Education Party, which was formerly the Voluntary Euthanasia Party. So there's one thing that you need to be very, very careful of when it comes to politics, and that is the name changes that take place from one election to another. It is without any shadow of a doubt that a strategic name change at the right time could score a micro party an additional potentially 1, 2, 3, or even up to 4% of the final vote. And given that quotas are only 4.5% in this election with 21 seats up for grabs, I dare say the changing of this particular name has been done in a manner in order to pull the wool over the eyes of the New South Wales voters in order to snatch votes from unsuspecting electors. So be very careful about that as well. And I would not touch the Public Education Party with a 40-foot pole. Moving
So
below,
sorry to interrupt you there. So that's Public Education Party, formerly the Pro-Euthanasia Party, a party that promotes suicide, basically.
Correct. They've just changed their name.
Disaster.
Absolutely. And this is the sneaky nature of elections. And we had a fraudulent party set up in Victoria called the Sack Dan Andrews Party, okay, admittedly set up by the election fixer Glenn Drury, who lives on a private yacht in your state, actually, Simeon. And this particular party was used as a vote harvesting operation, and in many instances actually shoveled votes back in favor of Dan Andrews. Can you believe it? But that's probably a story for another day. All right, we've got the Shooters, Fishers, Farmers Party. I know they have a reasonable supporter base in New South Wales. The Socialist Alliance, you know what they're about. Sustainable Australia Party, Stop Overdevelopment / Corruption. Okay, so I think this is a party not really here nor there. They do take up a lot of real estate on the ballot paper. So this is another trick that these micro parties like to use, and everybody at home should be aware of it. Parties that have a very long name, it's a little trick because having a long name takes up more of your line of sight, and they think that doing so is more likely to attract votes. So once again, seeking to score votes, not based on merit, not based on campaigning, just by virtue of a strategically crafted name. All right, moving along, we've got the Greens. We've got the Liberal Party of Australia. You know what they're about. We've got Elizabeth Farrelly Independents. Okay, I don't know anything about these people. You definitely want to do your checks and balances. There's a lot of fake independents out there, so don't just take their word for it that they're real independents. You want to find out who's bankrolling them, who are they associated with, are they connected to Climate 200, etc. And then we have the Small Business Party, which once again, you definitely want to be doing your research. So that is only 15 parties in the field, ladies and gentlemen. Now compare that to your last election. In New South Wales, there were 21 parties, and in the federal election, there were 24. So what that means is that there are less parties to go around, which is going to make scoring seats for the parties that you like easier in this election than the election that you experienced in the previous cycle. So you've got a great opportunity, my friends in New South Wales. So go on out there and support your favorite political party, provided, of course, they are supporting the values that we know are going to bring our country forward. Simeon.
Yeah, right. So, I mean, what comes to mind as we're talking, and we've got a comment there from a person in one of our subscribers saying they're proxy parties. I mean, we know quite a few of those parties that you've named you could call proxy parties that are just there to scoop up votes from unsuspecting voters and really shovel votes back to Liberal or Labor. And that's, very concerning. We need to alert everybody to that possibility. It's not a possibility. It's going to happen. It's 100% going to happen. At the end of the day, we know that either Liberal or Labor are going to win. It's just the way the system in Australia is rigged. I mean, we can put in a big effort. We can all try very hard, and there'll be some great candidates. There'll be some great independent candidates. There'll be candidates like Ricardo Bosi and others. But, I mean, at the end of the day, we'd be realistic. Liberal and Labor will take it away, either one of those parties. Now, how can we inflict as much electoral damage as possible? I mean, personally, I'm a little bit saddened that Brad Hazzard and David Elliott are taking the coward's way out and are not going to run again. They know they're going to lose. They know that what they've been doing for the last few years has made them wildly unpopular. You've got Dom Perrottet running in the seat of Epping. I mean, Dom's been pretty quiet and pretty cheeky. He's distanced himself from all of those lockdowns and all of the terrible things that were happening for the last 2 years. But what's really important is what I want everyone in New South Wales to do is to not forget and to remember what the government was doing to us. Let's not forget. Unfortunately, it's more than likely that a lot of people are going to go back to the polls, back to the voting booths, and they're going to go and vote Liberal, and they're going to go and vote Labor as if nothing happened. Well, we were all punished. We were all under mandates. We were all under lockdowns. We had people dying left, right, and center. We've still got people dying, and we can't forget. Lest we forget. It's important for us to rally together. Now, the second point I'd like to make, Morgan, is let's go back to a historical analogy: the Russian Civil War. We had the whites and the reds fighting. The whites were, for the Russian imperial government. The reds were the communists. Now, the reason why the reds won, because they were all for the reds. They weren't divided. They were all together. Unfortunately, the white army, someone was for the Tsar, somebody was for the local Cossacks, someone was for the Baron, someone was for, it was all over the place. And it sort of reminds me of what's happening now with the chances that we have as, you could call it the freedom vote. The freedom vote is about maybe 30% of the votes, 20 to 30%, let's call it, will go to parties like One Nation, LDP, independents like Bosi and other people, and IMOP and others. So that's the pool that we're looking at, that pool. Unfortunately, we look like the White Army in the Russian Civil War. They're all different. They're all pulling the blanket in their direction. Everybody wants to be king, and everyone's way is the highway, and nobody wants to sit down and negotiate. And there may be good reasons for that. I'm not saying it's a particularly bad thing. There are people, that are of principle and they just won't work with other parties because they consider themselves to be pure. And I actually, coincidentally, I think you're one of those. You're one of those people that are for principles and you won't make compromises. And unfortunately, politics is all about compromises, and the preference system is all about making compromises and compromising on your values and to give your votes to other parties whose values don't align to you. Now, we know that, you were involved in the UAP. There were some, there were attempts to try and get you on board with them. Same with me also. There were attempts from the UAP to get me on board, but we both learned quickly, and we knew maybe even from the beginning, but we hoped for the best. So it wasn't a lesson we learned, really. We hoped for the best, and we saw that it wasn't what we thought it was going to be, so to speak. Well, we know that the UAP are not registered in this New South Wales state election, and Craig Kelly maybe will run as an independent. There are rumours that there may be some talks between UAP and LDP, and at the end of the day, they're not rumours because we know that the last election they made preference deals, and in relation to the other parties, I mean, One Nation. I'm looking now personally. I'm looking very closely at what these leaders have been talking about in the last sort of last 1 year. Because personally, me, and I know this is a really personal view, but I wouldn't support any party that has been out there supporting the Zelensky regime or supporting war or supporting sending troops and weapons and Australian missiles overseas. So, guys, let me know in the comments section if you know of candidates who go against Penny Wong and Albanese's decision, although it's a federal issue. This is a state election, but that doesn't matter. I mean, federal issues can be brought up and they can be they can be relevant at state elections because at the end of the day, it affects all of us, getting involved in a war. So very complicated, as someone said in the comment section. But Morgan, how do you make? What's your perspective on that point of view?
Yeah, well, there's definitely a lot to consider, and as you said, it all comes down to preferences. But what the voting public need to accept is that ultimately you will be left with either a Liberal government or a Labor government. So what would you prefer? And I'm speaking to you, the people, the good people watching this broadcast right now. Would you prefer a Liberal government or a Labor? What type of crossbench would you prefer? Now, that's the real question right here. So the real crux of this situation is the extent to which the small parties who, let's just say, are aligned in terms of things that matter the most, such as our personal freedoms, have they been able to cooperate? Have they been able to formulate equitable preference deals that will give their representatives the best chance of election? Have they been campaigning, promoting their brand name? Have they been recruiting volunteers? To what extent will each of these parties in question have their polling booths covered with volunteers? Okay, so you need to remember that in a voting system such as New South Wales, where electors are able to choose their own preferences, it is most definitely very important that the parties involved have adequate volunteers to be handing out the how to vote cards. Otherwise, you could be looking at a situation where the vote is potentially split, whereby uninformed voters could be, say, for instance, voting one for one nation and then voting two for a party that could be nothing more than a proxy party for the socialist left. And that is the importance of how to vote cards, and that is the importance of people rolling up their sleeves and volunteering. So it's very difficult to see what the outcome will be. Simeon, it would be fantastic if we could have some type of broader awakening, and it would be an incredible scenario if we could see, say, 30, 40, 50% of voters voting for these smaller parties that are standing up for our freedoms. But that will not be the case. So get involved and be a part of shaping a crossbench that you think will best serve the people of New South Wales. And that's my best advice I can give.
Well, let's go back to your advice is coming off the back of your experience, and you're in. I would say you're qualified to talk about this because you had a good result in the last election. The prospects of the minor parties, the micro parties, and the different leaders and characters that we have in New South Wales sitting down and forming some kind of a coalition. That's what we really need. Without that, no one has any chance. And the question is, will these people be willing to sit down with each other? And I find it very hard to imagine that they would, but we should have a go. We should try. One man or two people or three people or four people, they can't change. They can't put a dent into the system. Even if all their hearts are in the right place and everyone's trying, everyone's out there. It's a great concept, and it'll be a great exercise. For unity, and it'll be exciting and enthusiastic. But at the end of the day, Liberal and Labor will just win. Either one will win at the end of the day. I'm looking at the perspective of maybe getting everyone together, having everyone to sit down and have a little conference. Maybe I might even host it. That's probably a good idea. Host a conference and invite everyone to come and talk, to come and sit down at the table. We need the heavy hitters, the hard hitters, the people that have a strong influence, strong followings, and the strong amount of the electorate behind them. And I think that's probably something that we could try to do in New South Wales, because again, it's that 20 to 30% that will be voting for freedom, and that we really need to capture, and we need to unite that 20 to 30%. Otherwise, we're all finished. Just in Victoria, for example, tell me, why didn't that happen? Why didn't that happen? Why was that freedom vote? Why was that 20 to 30% in Victoria? Why was it split? You had your Freedom Party of Victoria, and then you had a whole bunch of other micro and minor parties and independents.
Yeah, so it's probably more like 10 to 20%, say 20% when you're looking at the lower house, and probably up to, say 10 to 15% when you're looking at the upper house. Well, yeah, unfortunately, it is very difficult with these negotiations, Simeon. And what you will find is that when multiple political parties sit down to talk about preferences and seats they would like to win, you're often in a scenario whereby certain parties are under the impression they can win more seats than what could be possible. So you've got a little bit of friction there. So what really needs to happen is micro parties need to just take a little bit of a step back, understand that they can't win all the seats, and that will definitely pave the way for more equitable discussions. We also had, of course, the issue here in Victoria with the election fixer, Glenn Drury, who used to operate in New South Wales, but after electoral reform, the new voting system in New South Wales makes it very difficult for characters such as Glenn to profiteer off your elections. But since we've got the group voting ticket here in Victoria, what that actually allows is for political parties to pay an upfront fee of $5,000 plus an additional $50,000 should they get one of their candidates elected. And that fee goes to Glenn Drury, generally courtesy of the taxpayer. So we made a point here in Victoria. We said we're not going to commission these services. And we did find it difficult, of course, negotiating with other parties that we're using such services that most definitely interrupted the negotiations, because when it comes to preferences here in Victoria, the last thing you'd want to be doing is preferencing a party only for votes from your party to potentially end up somewhere of which you did not intend in the first place, and vice versa. So I would say in order to formulate a genuinely cohesive coalition, there needs to be some set terms of the coalition. So first of all, no paying for preferences, that sort of thing needs to go. You don't need to really worry about that in New South Wales. But what you really need is you need every actor at the table to leave their ego at the door. You need every party and candidate to be able to accept that, no, they cannot win all the seats, so they can't be greedy. And you need some sort of formalized agreement where you've got like-minded parties that lock each other in and they all preference each other and they decide where they will place the major parties on their tickets. Okay, so should a formalized agreement like that come to fruition, Simeon, and maybe you are the man to put it together, and should there be, I dare say, not just a memorandum of understanding, but a contract with ink signed on the dotted line, then I'd say that you're heading in a very good direction. So anyone that can facilitate a meeting like that and get these competing energies and forces to cooperate with each other, hats off to you, because a lot of the time, political parties, even those that are similar, they fight like cats and dogs. And I think we all know that that approach is not going to get us anywhere. So there definitely needs to be something a lot more formalized. And yeah, maybe you're the man to make it happen.
Well, I'm holed up in the Russian consulate. It would be interesting how we could make that happen. I mean, I'm sure the Russian consulate wouldn't be opposed. They wouldn't be opposed to hosting some type of a conference. I mean, we do not have much time, guys. We've got literally 46 days before the March, 25th of March, 2023 New South Wales election. And that 46 days means only 34 business days if you don't count weekends. So we're seriously running out of time. And, you know, it would be a real shame at the end of the day if we couldn't get our ducks in a row and we couldn't make a dent. I mean, it's been a big year. We've sort of been caught off guard with this election. There's been so much happening. There's been war, there's been controversy, there's been everything happening this year. There's been a lot of issues which have, distracted people from preparing for the election. And I can't even speak for myself. I've been inundated, honestly. It's been crazy. Jail, arrests, police, huge amount of politics this year, especially, you know, with the war going on overseas. So at the end of the day, we need to really think what we can do. And I'm putting it out there. I'm putting a call out there so no one can accuse me of, you know, not being fair. This is an open call out. Get in touch with me. I'll put the email on screen. And we've had a lot of emails in the last 24 hours, about collaboration. What we need to do, we need to collaborate. You know, we need to get behind people. We need to collaborate. We need to start having conversations. It's very difficult for any one person or any two people, any three people, any five people, any 10 people to win. But I'll tell you one thing straight off the bat. Anything that Clive Palmer is involved in, I'll be against. Awkward silence. So I lost you there, mate. Can you hear me?
Okay, I think we're back. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yeah, sorry, what was the question? I think it cut out there.
The last thing I said is anything Clive Palmer is involved in, if it's got his hands on it, or his fingerprints on it in terms of politics, I'll be violently opposed to. Violently in the metaphorical sense, of course.
Well, yeah, you're certainly entitled to act and respond to any type of situation that you see fit, my friend. But one thing that's really interesting is the fact that, of course, the United Australia Party is not contesting in the election, the state election of New South Wales. And when we look at the federal election, it actually paints a very interesting story because UAP did indeed achieve quite a large result of 162,000 votes, equating to 3.4% of the vote. That is nearly an entire quota in the New South Wales state election. So, guys, we've got all of a sudden over 160,000 votes that have been shaken free, just like you're shaking your tree and the apples fall off the tree. The question is, where are those apples going to go from the absence of the UAP? Will they go to One Nation? Will they go to Shooters, Fishers, Farmers? Will they go to the Liberal Democrats? You know what? Probably a lot of your audience are in New South Wales and are more familiar with the voting habits out there. So why don't you go ahead and put in the comments, where do you think those misplaced votes from UAP will go? Because I'd like to hear your comments as well.
Well, you know, at the moment, there are some signals that the Liberal Democrats Party, right, Liberal Democrats Party, which, by the way, I'm actually a member of that party. I've been a member since 2021. Believe it or not, paid my $80 back in the day, and you know, I'm hearing some rumors that there are some conversations between the LDP and the UAP. You know, personally, I think it would be a great tragedy if the UAP, in the absence of having its own registration in New South Wales, if they, you know, somehow infiltrated or influenced or got behind or became, you know, a grey cardinal in the LDP, that would be very tragic. You know, I don't think that's a good idea at all. So that's my position, and we'll see what plays out in the next few days. You know, there are a lot of conversations and meetings going on behind closed doors. So look, watch this space, guys. I'll try and bring you as many updates as possible. But let's talk about Ricardo Bosi. Let's talk about running on an independent ticket, and just explain to our viewers, Morgan, in regards to running as an independent, but as a group. And obviously, for those people who are unaware of the difference, running as an independent on your own and the benefits of actually running on a group ticket.
Absolutely. And it depends on which house the independent is running, Simeon. So when we speak about Ricardo Bosi, I know that in the past he has run as an independent for several lower house seats. Are you able to clarify if he's running for the upper house or the lower house? And I can comment.
Upper house.
All right. So running for the upper house. Now, state to state, the electoral laws are a little bit different. So I'm very familiar with how that works in Victoria and also at a federal level. So I'm going to speak about how that works, but please keep in mind that the laws might be a little bit different in New South Wales. Now, I've got experience running as an independent for the upper house. I ran as an independent for the Senate in last year's federal election as a group. So what that means is that 2 people or more submit their group ticket to the relevant electoral commission. And after that point, those names will appear on the ballot paper below the line with an additional box above the line that actually ends up being blank. So, all right. So try to picture this if you can. You've got an upper house ballot paper. You've got a big line through it. You've got above the line and below the line. At a federal level, if you run as an independent for the Senate with a running mate, the Electoral Commission will give you a blank box above the line, which makes it very, very difficult for voters to identify your position on the ballot paper, and it greatly reduces the visibility of the candidate. So at a federal level, I do not encourage it. It is most definitely an uphill battle. The rules may be a little bit different for New South Wales at a state level. Maybe if somebody knows, they can put it in the chat. But regardless, either way, it is an almost impossible feat to run as an independent for the upper house in any state, territory, let alone the federal the federal election, and especially given the fact that New South Wales does not have the group voting ticket, and given the fact that electors are required to number a range of boxes in sequential order of their preferred candidates, I would say that running as an independent for the upper house in New South Wales is impossible. And that is just simply my opinion based on facts and figures and statistics. But nonetheless, anybody that throws their hat in the ring, I say good on you. Go and stand up for your country. We need good people standing up. But the chances of getting elected in the upper house as an independent, basically zero.
So it's very hard to get elected the upper house as an independent. Is there a difference if you're just on your own or if you're on a group ticket?
So on a federal level, and this may or may not be the same in New South Wales, if you run as a singular person, as a singular independent for the upper house in the federal, your name will be below the line, shoveled off to the far right-hand side of the ballot paper, and there will be no such representation for your candidacy above the line. Okay, so once again, your name will be shoveled in to a sea of many other names, very hard for people to find you. And without the benefit of a group voting ticket, it is, you could say it is a guarantee that one will not be elected using such a strategy. There would need to be some type of extraordinary circumstance for somebody to get elected to the Senate like that as an independent, Simeon. Such as potentially
has that ever even happened?
a depression, and one person rises up and becomes the most well-known leader in the country. But anything outside of that, basically impossible.
I'm not sure that it's actually happened ever, or that someone has run for the Senate as an independent, ungrouped, and got in.
No, I do not believe it has ever happened in Australian history.
Yeah, it's almost impossible.
I would say it is. It's as close to impossible as one could possibly imagine.
So for the independents, the only logical possibility is for them to group together and run a ticket. And I suppose if enough independents group together on a ticket, and they've got enough heavy hitters, big names, people with large followings or well known, and to rally enough people together. And it doesn't matter if they're different. In fact, it's better if they're different. We need independents possibly who could group together on a group ticket, who come from different areas of New South Wales, represent different sections of the electorate, represent different views, maybe even different sort of multicultural backgrounds. Because one thing which is really important in the last 10 to 15 years in Australia is the multicultural vote. We've got seats, I think, without pointing at any specific nationality, we all know that that's how the Labor Party and Dan Andrews often get voted in. Same thing in New South Wales. They aim for the multicultural communities, and they directly sort of engage them, and they target them, by putting out electoral advertising and putting out material to target those multicultural groups. So at the end of the day, I mean, that's probably an option. For independents to group on a ticket together. I mean, it's definitely much better than people running on their own, which is impossible, as we've said.
It's definitely much better, but it's still a very steep uphill battle. And if it could be done, it would be most definitely a thing of beauty. I believe it may have happened in Victoria in the past due to the group voting system, whereby people in Victoria have been elected to the upper house on as little as 0.5% of the vote. Okay. So in a situation like that, yes, but in New South Wales or at a federal level, all I can say is miracles happen sometimes, but you wouldn't want to hold your breath.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, look, last election we had, just before the election, I was arrested and put into prison. This election, I'm locked up in a consulate, negotiating with police over, absolutely frivolous and ridiculous allegations of assault when it was clearly self-defense. I mean, even my enemies concede that was clearly a self-defense move. You've talked about it on your show as well. The latest update with that is that the police are refusing, and they've refused in writing now to charge the other party. They've actually said that the other bloke who was at that rally in the city, the Ukrainian guy, Alan Davis. Actually, he's not even Ukrainian. He's just a Ukrainian sympathizer. That somehow the police say he was entitled to, or he was lawfully allowed to assault me and grab me. And I think it's bizarre. It's ridiculous, and it reeks of corruption. And I think that the reason why this is happening is because there's an election coming up, because they want the Aussie Cossack to be locked up in jail or in a consulate or somewhere where he's off the streets, and knowing that, I will not be sitting to the side and being humble or compliant or complacent, or bowing my head to the police and police intimidation tactics. So they're up to their old tricks, and I think it's outrageous that they refuse to charge that guy. And I know you've covered this on your show too, so there's an update for you on that.
Yeah, I definitely covered it. And something that is really fascinating is, of course, the fact that the person in question who did aggressively put his hands on you first has not been charged with an offense. Now, I did a little bit of reading, Simeon, in relation to some various high-profile self-defense cases that have taken place in our country. And what it appears is that in the face of injustice, sometimes these cases need to make their way all the way to the High Court in order for justice to finally prevail. Now, I certainly hope that you don't need to go that entire stretch, because, of course, it's a very much an exercise of attrition, if you will. But let me just ask you, how far are you willing to take these charges in order to clear your name and to seek justice?
Well, I'm happy to go all the way, and I think that the further we go, there's a saying in Russian, "Тем дальше лес, чем дальше в лес, тем больше дров," as my wife just corrected me. So the further you go into the forest, the more branches and the darker it gets. And this is what it is for the police and for the government. Instead of nabbing this straight away, instead of doing the right thing in regards to this situation with these frivolous assault charges, they should have done it straight away. Now, the further they go, the further we'll go. And if we have to, we might go to the High Court. My lawyer, Mark Davis, is negotiating with the police, and everyone is pointing out the fact that, I was attacked by a deranged protester while I was filming, as an independent journalist, which I have every single right to, and just it's a matter of how far the police want to take it, because the further it goes, the more embarrassing it will be for the New South Wales police. And it's just another opportunity for the general public to have a look at the corruption in the police. It doesn't bring me any advantage being someone who's unvaccinated and Russian at the same time. That's like being in the worst category possible.
Unvaccinated, Russian, straight, conservative, you're just ticking all the boxes there, my friend.
Well, absolutely. And look, at an election time, this is when the establishment starts really going into protection mode. They start to protect themselves, and they will start taking out political adversaries. They start taking out those voices and those people out there who are speaking against them, which is very important for us as the electorate to have a look at, false opposition parties, fake opposition leaders, who are really proxy parties, and they're just vote harvesters, harvesting votes for Liberal and Labor. And they'll name themselves whatever you want to hear. They'll call themselves the Cannabis Party, the Animal Party, the Teachers Party, the whatever party, the
Save the Trees Party.
Save the trees, and but at the end of the day, they're just collecting votes. So people go to the ballot box.
Pro-hunting party, right? It's just, it's ridiculous when you look at some of the names that come into existence in the political arena, and many of the obscure political parties that existed have most definitely been headed up by the very well-known New South Wales resident by the name of Glenn Drury in order to fuel these vote harvesting operations. But nonetheless, voters need to be informed, do your homework, find out if you're intending on voting for a party, who is that party preferencing? Do you feel comfortable with those preferences? And ultimately, every person who votes needs to make a decision, which is, do you prefer a Liberal government or a Labor government? Everyone needs to make that decision. unfortunately, we can't wipe the parties out for the foreseeable future. They are here to stay. And that's just the reality of a decision that all voters need to make.
Absolutely. I mean, we've got people in the comment section saying the voting system needs to be controlled by an outside governing body. At the end of the day, whoever's throwing the peanuts, and as Joseph Stalin once said, it doesn't matter how people vote; it matters who's counting the votes. And we saw Albanese. 34% of the country voted for him, and he's the prime minister. So the majority did not vote for Albanese.
Well, that's exactly right, and there's an argument right there for should we keep the preferential voting system alive in Australia, or should we have a system more similar to the United States, which is more of a first past the post system, whereby new parties and small parties stand no chance. It's a race between the big two parties. Now, some people don't like the idea of that, Simeon, but for me, I don't think it's so much of a bad idea, because what you'd actually see is the drastic expansion of factions within the two major parties. You'd see new groups trying to steer these parties in different directions. So it would create a very, very different political dynamic. And it's very hard to speculate whether or not that would be better or worse. But what it would do is probably favour the Liberal Party in some areas, whereby Labor is very, very dependent on preferences from the Greens. So I know we have over 400 people watching the show right now. What do you think? Would you prefer a past the post voting system in Australia? Do you like it the way it is? Or do you think the whole system just needs to be thrown out, turned on its head, and replaced with something else?
Well, there are people there watching now that are saying that the whole system is corrupt and there's nothing we can do to stop the system. And, from one point of view, maybe that's true. But the very minimum, running a very strong campaign, and also, guys, running counter campaigns. That's something that I've done in the past. Fiona Martin, for example, in the seat of Reid, we ran an excellent counter campaign against Christina Keneally, who also lost her attempt. She was unsuccessful in her attempt to take the seat of Fowler. So as we get the lists and the lists of candidates, we'll be able to see who's who and where we should direct our energy to stop people, where we should support people. And we'll look, guys, I'll endeavour to reach out to as many candidates as possible. We'll invite Ricardo Bosi on the show in the next few days. We'll have other candidates on. We'll reach out to One Nation, IMOP, the other freedom parties, and we'll try and give everyone a say. And we'll see what people have to say, because look, it's not easy. It's not easy, guys, it's not easy to campaign. It's not easy to campaign. We don't have much time. 46 days left. I don't want to sound like I'm, alarming, but I am. I am really saying, guys, we've got to pull our socks up and we've got to do something about it. To be quite honest, the Liberal Party as well, the Liberal Party and the Labor Party seem to be also very disorganised. This election has sort of crept up on everybody. And I know as of a few weeks ago, the Liberals didn't even have candidates in their seats. Can you believe the Liberal Party still hadn't got their candidates straight?
Yeah, it's not surprising, Simeon. We see the exact same thing here in Victoria with both the major parties, let alone the minor parties, let alone the micro parties, leaving everything until the last minute, leaving it until the last minute to endorse candidates for a range of different seats, both lower house and upper house. And it really just makes you think that, is that the stock standard approach to politics in our country? Just pretend politics and elections don't exist for years on end. And when the election is around the corner, everybody just starts getting frantic, getting into action, trying to raise money, calling for donations, endorsing candidates. It's definitely not the way that, it's definitely not a winning formula. It's not a formula for success. So I think that we will be doing things a lot differently, as in myself and my team. Now, I'm not going to say exactly what that is, Simeon. You don't want to just reveal your hand to potentially your enemies on a silver plate, but things need to change in this country, and it's only going to change with people power. So if you're watching at home, you can ask yourself the question, what have you done over the past few years? Are you, in terms of bringing about positive change in our country? Have you stood up for Australia? If so, do you think you did enough? Could you have done more? And what would you like to change? So I think it's incumbent on every single man and woman who loves this country to really recognize that freedom is most definitely not guaranteed. And if you want to maintain that freedom, there's something that you need to be doing, even if it's something small, every single day. And Australia is worth it, right? We love our country. We live in a beautiful country. We don't love the government. We say the government's not fit for purpose. We wouldn't mind throwing them out or voting them out, or whichever way you want to look at it. But in order to do that, it takes hard work. It takes dedication. It's very, very difficult, but it is not impossible.
Definitely. Look, and just while you're talking there, it came to mind any politician in Labor or Liberal that didn't speak up during the lockdowns, that didn't speak up, to protect the people, to speak up on behalf of the people's freedom. None of them deserve to be in power anywhere. And look, we'll get through this in the next few days as the lists become available, and we'll start going through, guys, and ticking off and crossing off all over the place. We've got to name and shame the bad guys, and we've got to name the bad guys. And it's if you're silent, if you were silent and you're a politician, that means you're bad. That means you went along with it, and you're either too gutless or you were paid off. And the people will not forget. And we need to remind those people that are forgetting. We need to remind those people that are forgetting. If anyone, honestly, in 2023 in March can go to the polls and vote for Liberal or Labor, they need a lobotomy. Quite honestly, it's like you want harm to yourself. I was in disbelief, to be quite honest, Morgan, and all of us were in New South Wales when we saw the results in the Victorian election. How after all that Dan Andrews had done to the people seemingly went back and voted for him. Now, personally, I think it's impossible. I think there must have been some type of, voter fraud or rigged election. I don't see how Victorians could be so, Stockholm syndrome sufferers to go back and vote for Dan after all that he's done.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. Well, Labor, off the top of my head, achieved somewhere in the vicinity of 36% of the vote. But of course, with the Greens and the other small left-wing parties, they were able to actually increase their majority in the lower house, which was really shocking to a lot of people. And Dan Andrews has really mastered the strategy of bribing Victorians with their own money. If you look at his strategy, it's very cunning, it's very manipulative, but it's also very smart. He'll give free registration to the tradies. He'll give a $3,000 payment to all the healthcare workers. He'll give a cultural grant to all the different religious denominations. He'll go through every single sector and give out something for free. Now, you and I know that these things are not free. They are paid for courtesy of the taxpayer, but that is the type of language that is used. And unfortunately, I think when we look throughout many instances in history, people at large will generally be more likely to do what's familiar instead of taking a risk, which is what they should be doing. So even if there's a cohort of people out there who perhaps they don't like Dan Andrews, many of them still voted for him because they perceived him as being a stable leader. It was potentially the endorsement from John Setka from the CFMEU that led lots of people in the construction industry to vote for Dan Andrews, who otherwise would not have voted for him. Anyone who kept tabs on the events in Victoria would remember the tradie protest from 2021 and I was out there as well with all the tradies. We got literally shot with rubber bullets. We had canisters fired at us that exploded, grenades that were fired by the police that released tear gas. And I can tell you getting hit with that stuff is very unpleasant. But the narrative that was sold to the construction industry in Victoria was literally, yes, Dan's a prick. And I'm quoting the language of the CFMEU. They said, yes, Dan's a prick, but he'll keep us working for the next 3 decades. And that type of language resonated, Simeon. The Labor machine have the socialist system worked out from the inside out, bribe people with their own money, lead the population to believe that their leadership is stable. And even if they're not happy, people feel they must vote for this big brother government anyway, because an alternative would supposedly be so much worse. Now, we need to potentially become better at informing our fellow Australians that taking a risk is not a bad thing, especially when it is taking a risk for the possibility of ridding our country of what can only be described as a tyrannical government and a leader who's drunk on power. So what this really indicates is that I need to lift my game. We all need to lift our game. We need to work harder. We need to fight harder. We need to fight smarter. We need to explore alternative avenues for reaching out and connecting with various areas of the community, people that we have not been able to connect to. We need to regroup, come back stronger, and keep marching forward. That's all we can do.
You make a very good point there, Morgan, about Dan Andrews buying people off before the Victorian election. And it looks like Don Perrottet is doing the same thing. I mean, we had the one-off $250 payments in Victoria, to so-called to help with the cost of living, just before the Victorian election in 2022. And 2 days ago, Don Perrottet, the Liberal Premier, announces the same thing, a one-off $250 payment in New South Wales. Officially, they're calling it a payment to slash money off the power bill, but then they turned around and said that the $250 will go to anyone, regardless of their power bill. So it really is, it's like buying people off. It's like buying people off before the election is basically bribery. I mean, if Vladimir Putin or Iran or North Korea or Libya or someone else or Syria did that, the West would be pointing the finger, and Penny Wong would be out there, pointing the finger and saying, how terrible is that? They're buying people off, they're buying votes. But when the Australian government does it, when Don Perrottet does it, when Dan Andrews does it, when he buys people off by promising them money before the election, and targeting sectors. You know what really sickens me? It's when how they buy off the multicultural communities, how they buy off the churches, the mosques, the temples, and that's what they did during the lockdowns when they were trying to promote the jabs. Now, they went to the muftis, they went to the ethnic communities, and they literally paid them. They said, what would you like? Would you like a new upgrade of your hall or your kitchen or your fence? Or is there anything we can help you with? There's like, take the money, just make sure when you get up in front of your congregation, when you get up in front of your, flock, when you get in front of your community, you tell them to follow what the government says. And the government has money for that. Australia this year earning an extra $111 billion thanks to the rising prices of commodities, that we're selling to China, iron ore and coal and whatnot. So there is money in the government to throw around, and they're so fixated on power that they will throw money at people. They will buy votes, right? They will buy votes. At the same time as doing that, they will rush in any laws to make it even harder and almost impossible for minor parties, for small parties, for micro parties, for independent candidates to run, to register, and to get funding. And that's really disgusting. Is that a democracy? It's not democracy. Democracy is a place where the little guy has a chance. And democracy is a place where the person off the street, the student or the single mum or the teacher or the tradie or anyone out there who decides to go into politics has a chance. What we have now in politics is a club, and we're not part of it. And these people are all about covering each other up with suppression orders, with their clubs and their I don't even want to talk about it. It's all sickening, and they're all involved in it. And the people are sick. The people really are sick of it. And it's a message, guys, for those tradies that follow John Setka in the CFMEU in Victoria. You're selling out yourselves. You're selling yourselves out. Setka should have been got rid of. They should have got rid of him a long time ago. It's the unions. It's the CFMEU that sold out the workers immediately when the mandates came in. Instead of sticking up for the workers, they sold the workers out. So it's unfortunate to hear all of these things, and this is reality in Australia that's happening, and it just furthers the cause for change. We really need drastic change. Those people that are happy with the current government, that they can honestly say that they approve of what the government did in the last 3 years, they are sellouts. They're sellouts, and they'll go and they'll vote for the Greens, they'll vote for Labor, they'll vote for Liberal, they'll vote for Teal, and that's where it'll end for them. So, guys, we'll answer 3 more questions before we wrap this up. Under 1 hour, we've got 4 minutes left. And again, thank you very much for tuning in. Hit the like button, hit the share button. Let's have a look at final questions, guys. We've got. Let's have a look. Question here. What do you think of Bosie Simeon? Well, I think Bosie is an excellent excellent speaker. He's an excellent leader. And I would say that that's the kind of person we need to throw into the Senate. It'd be great to, literally like a spanner in the works. You guys out there, some of you may not agree, you disagree, whatever it is. But what really motivates me to support him is because we need somebody like that. We need people like that in there during question time to ask the hard questions, to put it on them. There aren't too many people that aren't afraid to ask the hard questions, right? And those people that are ready to ask the hard questions of the politicians, we should definitely get behind them. So that's my position, and we'll talk about that in the next few days. In fact, an open invitation for Ricardo Bosi, come on the show. We'll have a chat, and we'll hear about his plans, and we'll see how we can support Ricardo and all the other freedom candidates, because we really need to rally behind these people, guys. We don't have much time left. 46 days. Tomorrow, 45 days. So next question, we'll get there, and probably here's a question for. Here we go. Klaus Schwab, Mr. Cossack, I will get you on the board of the WEF. Very funny. No, thank you. Okay, here's a question for you, Morgan. Who gave Albanese and Wong the right to give our taxes to Ukraine? What's your position on that?
My position is what it has been since the start of this conflict, and that is one of neutrality. I don't want to see Australia getting dragged into this war. I think we need to be focusing on building our military, building our defense capability. Our own ADF is understaffed, under-resourced, and in a volatile geopolitical climate that we're now living in, we must have the strongest military possible. So who gave them the authority? It certainly wasn't the people. I don't remember voting for Australian Bushmasters to be sent overseas, and I don't want to see our good men and women in uniform sent over to participate in the conflict. My opinion is really, really simple. I wish that Australia had a neutral position and was involved in peace negotiations, and I am very concerned where this is all heading.
Very good. That's a very sober position, guys, and that's another one of the reasons why going to this election, we're going to vet on this channel. I'm going to tell you who the pro-Ukraine war candidates are and who are the candidates who say no to war, no to Australian involvement, and we'll get through a list of that in the coming days. We will, because a lot of candidates. In fact, that's one of the reasons why I do criticize Craig Kelly, because at the beginning of the conflict, he straight away backed the Ukrainian side. But we know that he has a Ukrainian girlfriend who seems to be influencing him a little bit, and that's his personal issue. But it's a shame. It's a shame. Sorry I have to say that. Look, honestly, Craig is a good guy. He's a nice guy, but unfortunately, with all of the controversy there and the involvement of Clive Palmer, I don't want to have anything to do with if Clive's involved. If UAP is anywhere, and they're not in the election, but there are signals and there is intel coming through that they are trying to promote some of the other parties and spread their sort of position there. You've got a red ensign there for us, Morgan?
I do. So I think we're all familiar with this flag, and I just wanted to mention to the good people, the good subscribers of the Aussie Cossack YouTube channel, that I'm actually heading to New South Wales really soon. I've been dying to get out of the Socialist Republic of Victoria. I'm a sucker for punishment, so I'm not moving. I'm staying here in the Victorian fight. But I'm coming up on the 18th. I'm heading to a place that I think many of you will be familiar with, the Caledonian Hotel, otherwise referred to as the Cali in Singleton, a great establishment whereby the owner has stood strong in the face of many attacks. He never discriminated. He kept his doors open. He did the right thing. He represents what our country is about. He has a big red ensign on his roof. So anybody that would like to join me for a beer, I'll be doing a talk on the Victorian state of affairs, and that is from 5 p.m. the 18th of this month at the Cali in Singleton, New South Wales. So come and have a beer.
All right, so let me tell you, it takes 2 hours to get from Sydney to Singleton. So Morgan, on the 18th at 12 o'clock, you're invited to come to the Sydney Worldwide Freedom Rally.
Oh, yeah.
And that's
yeah, cool.
So that's on the Saturday, the 18th, 12 o'clock. The location has been announced. There are some locals organising it, and they've decided to organising it, of all places, I don't know why, but in the diplomatic quarter, which is where the consulates are. So I might even come out and address the crowd, and it is my birthday in the vicinity of the 18th. So this is a general call out to everybody. Come on the 18th. We have a bunch of speakers there, and you'll have plenty of time to get to Singleton. It takes 2 hours via the M1. You can leave by 3 o'clock and make it in time for the Kelly. There you go, guys.
Yeah, I'd definitely love to go to the march, and I'd like to meet as many of you out there as possible, and then jump in your car, head to the Kelly. And my friend, I wish that you could join us there, but for sure you're fighting a very, very worthy fight, and there will be freer times ahead for you, no doubt.
Definitely. Guys, well done. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you very much to everyone on the channel today, and a special thanks to our guest from Victoria, Morgan Jonas, leader of the Victorian Freedom Party. Or should I say the Freedom Party of Victoria? How do you say it correctly?
Freedom Party of Victoria. That's
the one, Freedom Party of Victoria. So we've got coming up on the 18th in Sydney, 12 o'clock at the Russian Consulate, 7 Fullerton Street, Wallara. That's where the consulate district is. And we've got, after that, Singleton at the Kelly, 5 o'clock, there's an event. And there are some more events as well. There's, I think, on the 12th, there's something happening in Canberra. And you check out our Telegram channel, because I've posted all this information there. Telegram at Aussie Cossack. You'll find all of those posters and all of those flyers available. So also Adelaide, guys. Adelaide, something happening on the 18th. Perth on the 18th. Brisbane on the 18th. Cairns even on the 18th. So it's all happening all over the country. Starting also, in Canberra on the 12th. Things are happening. Let's start gearing up. Christmas, New Year's is over. Holidays are over. It's time to get into the rhythm of things and make an impact, make a push. Continue holding the line, and we'll be back with more tomorrow night on the Aussie Cossack channel. Thank you.